Hey everyone, what's going on? Welcome to 2 Minutes to Review. It's Matt.
And it's Zach.
If you haven't joined us for one of these before, this is our album review show. Going to do a little bit of a different format this time because you clicked on the episode and it is what we're lovingly calling our 1983 episode.
One nice little tagline there. I guess it's better than me saying, hey Matt, want to feel old? Which I also love to say too.
Yes.
But we decided because it is 2023 and two albums celebrate their 40th anniversary this year. And these particular albums, for better or worse, really shaped what both hair metal and hard rock in general would sound like for a majority of the 80s in different ways too. I'm talking, of course, about Def Leppard's Pyromania, the massive successful diamond record selling album, and Motley Crue's Shout at the Devil, an album that arguably really helped break them specifically out into broader stardom and laid the groundwork for them becoming also one of the biggest metal bands in the world. Now, I know what you're thinking. Hey, Matt, Zach, haven't you guys been like a little extra critical of Motley Crue and Def Leppard over the years? Yes. And for rightfully so, for various reasons. In Def Leppard's case, Matt, you went to bat to say that the song Rock of Ages, in particular, was one of the most overplayed songs on the radio during one of the very first, if you have to pick 3 episodes.
Oh, one of our very first episodes, period.
Yes.
So if you remember that episode, thank you for being with us all this time. If you haven't heard it yet,
go and listen to it on any streaming platform you can imagine. But then also, you've probably heard our 2 Minutes to Review episode where we reviewed the Netflix movie version of The Dirt. I won't even go down that rabbit hole. Just listen to it. You'll hear our critiques, our thoughts on the movie itself. But needless to say, yes, we've been a little bit critical of those particular bands. It's hard to explain why, but I think part of it is not necessarily the quality of the music or the band members' performances in current day, but I think it's fair to say, especially in Def Leppard's case, like Matt argued in that past, if you have to pick 3 episodes, both bands have really been overplayed, but Def Leppard in particular, you really go to any classic rock station, they're constantly playing a Def Leppard song. So I think, Matt, feel free to say no, Zach, you're off, base here, but I wouldn't be surprised if part of it's also like, all right, we've overheard these guys already. Like, let's move on to something else.
they could say the same about us, but
It's true.
they're still here.
And yet you keep coming back to hear us too.
Thank you.
But we thought, you know what? It's 2 landmark albums, not just for each band respectively, but also for the 80s metal scene. And chances are, if you're listening to this, you've probably already seen Motley Crue and Def Leppard at least once tour of each other in the past 2 years. They're continuing to tour again together, mainly in Europe and Latin America, but also a few U.S. states sprinkled in.
When was the last time you saw either one of them?
Me?
Yeah, you.
I know exactly what it was for Motley Crue, at least, because we also talked about this show. Motley Crue, during their final tour in 2014, quote, final Madison Square Garden show. If you recall, we did a Am I Missing Something episode about concert cliches. And I talked about how, an example of band members going on too long of rants on stage, the time about how Nikki Sixx actually literally said to a packed Madison Square Garden crowd going, everyone, I want you to sit down because I have a story to tell you, and proceeded to spend 5 to 10 minutes explaining how Motley Crue formed, as if no one in the room had read The Dirt.
And then on our Twitter,
Instagram,
says to us, yeah, I can be a little bit long-witted. So he admits he's...
Yes. And I also, just the fact that Nikki Sixx commented on our post of ours was amazing.
Yes.
I definitely humble brag right there. That was the last time I saw Motley Crue. And I'm trying to think back when the last time I saw Def Leppard. I don't know if I actually have seen Def Leppard live now that you mention it. Have you seen Def Leppard live?
I can safely say that I've never seen Def Leppard live because I'm sick and tired of Def Leppard, but that's just me. If you're a Def Leppard fan, please let me know how you feel.
On Instagram, Twitter, Facebook.
But Motley Crue, the last time I saw them was... I don't think it was the same tour, but it might have been the same tour that you're talking about. But I saw them when they were with Aerosmith.
That was a different tour, and that was actually early on during their, I guess, let's call it
Resurgence?
Let's call it the second reunion.
Okay.
The more successful reunion.
Yes. And I can say that Motley Crue safely blew away Aerosmith in every way, shape, and form on that show. Motley Crue and their stage presence, they've always been known for it. And now when you get to see like them on a tour with somebody else, and there's a stark contrast on stage, like they had pyro, strippers, they had cages and people flying from the ceiling, and then Aerosmith comes out with a completely stark set. It was just literally a ramp up, a ramp down, and maybe an extension into the crowd, I think. And that was it.
So I'm actually going to say that I've seen Motley Crue 3 times now. And the best set I've seen from them was during Ozfest 2010 when they had, in Motley Crue sense, a bare bones stage presence. When it was really just the 4 of them. Maybe they had dancers, but like the antics and it was like, I remember the first time I saw them, the first half was like, wow, it's 4 guys just rocking out. And then it got all theatrical and Nikki was shooting fire. It just became too much of like a production. I'm like, I want to actually hear the music here. And seeing them on at Ozfest in 2010, I was like, oh, I get to actually see the 4 of them play. And it was very fun. And that's actually, I know that most fans would be like, no, you want to go see Motley Crue for the craziness. It's like, actually to see them, the 4 of them rock out was the highlight of their set. And that's why, as much as I am sad to see Mick Mars go, even though he has earned every right to retire given his health condition and everything he's gone through, I'm actually excited to see what John Five will bring to them on stage. Because John Five is a phenomenal guitarist, but if you've seen him with Rob Zombie, you know he puts on a hell of a show too. So I think he's going to actually, he's the only person that really could play with Motley Crue. In place of Mick Mars, I should say.
Yeah, and I think and this could just be pure speculation on my part, but I remember that there was early on that, and even going into the episode here a little bit, talking about Shout at the Devil, that they wanted to originally replace Mick way back when. So
there's always been rumors about that. And there's also even, I mean, we might touch on this a little bit more later in the episode. Hint, hint, stick around. But even just there's rumors that the last few records, Mick doesn't even play on the album. I don't know how true that is.
Yeah, I don't know either. But maybe this is something that the crew have always wanted to try, and now they're finally getting to try it. And maybe it'll lead to something else with them not retiring or saying, this is it, or maybe we're going to get another new album at some point. But I'm very curious to see if John Five does anything to kickstart Motley Crue. And see if they go into another era with John Five. It begs the question, and I think I could see them doing it, but who knows at this point with them.
Yeah. And is it even worth it? But maybe we can save that part for a later discussion. But real quick too, and I apologize if I missed this, have you seen Def Leppard live?
I said I safely can say I've never seen Def Leppard live because I'm sick and tired of Def Leppard.
That's right. Well, let's get you a little bit more sicker. I think, to be fair and alphabetical, let's start with Def Leppard's diamond-selling album, Pyromania. Matt, would you like to go first, or would you like me to go first?
I will let you go first.
Oh, what a gentleman.
Why break tradition here in the new year?
Ready? All right. Ready to like a bomb to bomb, bomb, bomb. I know that's not song on that album, but
I will safely say I'd rather see Tom Cruise do it in Rock of Ages than Def Leppard. Boom, said it. 3, 2, 1, go.
Well, before you hear Matt's cynical take on this classic album, I can honestly say that this is an example of an album just getting so overplayed that you forget the good quality elements of it. It's a fun record, and it definitely is more on the pop rock side, of course, but it's definitely, you kind of forget how great of a produced album it is. I mean, that's definitely Mutt Lange. I mean, his production is so crisp and well done, and it actually really does make the guitar work on this album really fun, especially on some deep cuts like Die Hard, The Hunter, and Come Under Fire. It's definitely just a fun record, but I also kind of forgot until revisiting this album how much Joe Elliott really tries to sound like AC/DC on a lot of songs, especially on songs like Stage Fright and Rock Till You Drop. In fact, I'd even make the argument that Pyromania maybe answers the question, what if AC/DC opted to make a sleek, produced pop record, or maybe even more specifically, what if AC/DC decided, let's make an album that sounded all like You Shook Me All Night Long instead of more gritty, straightforward hard rockers? I mean, songs like Action, Not Words, you could argue that it's just a polished version, a polished AC/DC song. But with that said, it's still a fun record that I totally understand why it took everyone by storm and craze in the 80s, and how even today, when you listen back to it, it makes you think, man, I am in a good, feel-good time. I definitely want to party.
And we have a time. Star rating out of 5.
Out of 5? Yeah, I'm going to go with 3.5, maybe even 4. The production's so good that this is what a polished bubblegum AC/DC would sound like, whether that ruffles your feathers or not. It definitely was a surprise at how much I forgot how much I enjoyed this album. I'd say 3.5.
Okay.
And I have another hot take that I will share after we discuss Motley Crue's Shout at the Devil. But okay. I won't go too much further. Matt, are you ready?
I am ready.
Or are you just going to keep fooling me into thinking that I would be surprised by what you're about to say?
I mean, if you want to be stuck here long enough, take a photograph and we'll come back to it later. Oh, that wasn't good.
It wasn't terrible.
All right.
It was terrible. 3, 2, 1, go.
So this album really signified a change with Def Leppard sound. If you don't know, they really were trying to be more on the heavy metal train prior to this album. And then they decided, you know what, we're going to go the pop route, the pop rock route. And we're going to see, kind of where this goes. First and foremost, this is the first album they brought Phil Collen in on guitar, even though he didn't really contribute all that much. Their original guitarist, Pete Willis, actually did a lot of the tracking prior to Phil joining the band, but he came in, he said he got to do all the fun parts, so it really shows on the album why, kind of how Def Leppard changed their sound. Like you really got the sense that this is a new era and it ushered in a new feeling for Def Leppard. You kind of saw on High and Dry, like Bringing on the Heartbreak really was like their biggest hit from that album. And that was more on the pop side. And well, if it worked once, why won't it work again? And it worked on an entire album. So, I mean, my favorite song on here is Rock Till You Drop. I mean, and like I've been alluding to earlier, that I've heard Photograph, Too Late for Love, Foolin', Rock of Ages, all of these songs so many times. But there's a reason why you hear these songs so many times. It's because they're just that good of songs. It's just the overplaying of them that leaves a stale taste in your mouth. And kind of like what Zach said, he mentioned that Def Leppard really, hit their, well, not hit their stride, but really had a great album here with Pyromania, and you forget how good it is because you hear it so much, but there's a reason why you hear it so much, and the reason why this became one of the biggest albums of the 80s.
You actually did fool me there.
I did.
I really was expecting a little bit more of a negative Nancy.
I can turn it on when I need to, but the reason why is it's not a fair review if I just come in and shit on the album.
No, of course.
If I shit on the album, it's because it deserves to be shit on. This one, there's a reason why you hear it so much.
Photograph is still, even with it overplayed, I still go, man, that is a great pop rock song.
Look at this photograph.
Well, no, not that one.
Oh. Every time I hear it, it makes me laugh.
But even like you jokingly mentioned Nickelback, but you kind of, as you listen to some of the songs, you go, oh, I do get why a lot of mainstream hard rock acts now, like, yeah, they really were influenced by Def Leppard more than I think they would let on to. So you joke about Nickelback, but we've mentioned in the past episodes too that Nickelback's just basically the Canadian version of Def Leppard at this point. Whether you like it or not. But out of 5 stars, what do you give it?
I mean, I'm going to give it 4, just to be fair. And any prejudice any prejudice that I have, it's because I worked at a active/classic rock radio station for a long time, and every time I worked, I heard Def Leppard at least 3 to 4 times. So that's where all my prejudice comes from.
Listen, if you work at an ice cream shop, you get sick of eating ice cream too. I get it.
I did that too. Fun fact, I used to work at Dairy Queen.
I get that too. So before we move on to both revealing our times for this particular review, because I also recognize we still got a lot more episode to go because we also have to review Motley Crue Shadow of the Devil. But I do think it's worth mentioning that this year also marks 15 years since Def Leppard released the album Songs from the Sparkle Lounge. You know what? That's kind of all that might need to be said, maybe. I just thought it might be worth mentioning how you can definitely tell that well, this album, Pyromania, dare I say, groundbreaking for its time.
The creme de la creme of Def Leppard.
Yeah. Like, you listen to Sparkle Lounge and you're like, okay, they're just trying to cater to people who like the idea of Def Leppard more than they actually like Def Leppard.
I don't understand the title of the album. If you can explain it, please, by all means, let me know.
Let us know on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram.
I sat there when this album came out because, once again, I worked at that radio station for a long time. And the album came out, and I was trying to figure out, what the hell do you mean Songs from the Sparkle Lounge? What's the Sparkle Lounge? Is that like the Champagne Room? Is that the same thing? Like,
this was their attempt at trying to do what Bon Jovi did in the mid to late 90s, where they were just trying to reinvent themselves to cater to the country fans who also liked the occasional classic rock
I can see that, but the album title is awful.
Oh no, the title is just crap. It's not even worth going into that further.
Yeah, but outside of like the song 9 Lives, the album's a complete throwaway. It's complete trash. And anything that they've really done since then, maybe even since the mid to late 90s, I think is pretty much garbage too.
I mean,
like the new one that they did, the Diamond Halos one. I don't even know the whole name of it, but it's bad. It's totally overproduced. Like if you took like a modern metalcore band and put their production on Def Leppard, that's what it sounds like, and it's awful.
Again, it's also kind of hard when you compare Pyromania, which you could argue is the perfect example of what 80s production sounded like.
Right, but then you can also make the argument that AC/DC still sounds like the AC/DC you know on their latest ones. Like the production on there isn't trying to be crazy over the top because it's AC/DC, and you know what you're going to get with them, and it's always middle of the road. It's like if you're a fan of AC/DC, you've always been a fan of AC/DC, you're going to like it. But I think Def Leppard has gone so far up and down in their career, like with their sound, that it's really every album's kind of like,
they try too hard to be relevant.
Yeah, you're trying way too hard to stay in the limelight when what you really need to do is do what you did on Pyromania. Make it clean. Phil can play guitar. You don't really need to hide it. And Joe, I think, can still sing. You don't need to hide it.
Yeah.
Just let them do what they're good at doing. Don't try to do what modern metal bands or what modern bands are doing because they're hiding something. They're not as talented as these guys.
Yeah, and that's high praise. Well, before we move on to our reviews of Motley Crue's Shadow of the Devil, Matt, what time did my review clock in for Def Leppard's Pyromania?
You came in at probably one of your better times.
Ooh.
1 minute, 50 seconds.
Ooh, well, guess what, Matt? This is a tie.
Tie.
1 minute and 50 seconds. Let's just celebrate that we both are winners here.
Wow. So we tied.
Mazel tov.
I don't know how I feel about that.
Well, I guess it's a good thing that we have another album review to do in this episode to redeem ourselves, right?
This is true.
Here we go. Let's not forget about another album that came from the LA scene.
Shout at the devil! I can't do it.
Better than Vince Neil. Anyway, with that said, Matt, since you let me go first with Pyromania,
Okay.
I'd like you to go first.
Sure.
With your review of Shadow of the Devil.
Let's do it.
So you just shout when you're ready.
Shout!
3, 2, 1. That was just great. I loved it. Simple, great humor. 3, 2, 1, go.
So this is a stark contrast to Pyromania, because Pyromania, you have to remember, was an album that was highly pushed and highly produced, and the label really got behind Def Leppard. This album from Motley Crue, they pretty much drummed up all of the publicity all on their own. Elektra Records really didn't do too much for them with the album. And what ended up happening was, I think, a really kind of big push for Motley Crue building their credibility, because they did this all on their own volition through word of mouth and people coming out and seeing their shows, that the album really kind of gained its notoriety. It sold 200,000 copies all on Motley Crue in the first 2 weeks. And that's saying a lot for a band. And obviously Motley Crue, this being one of their biggest albums, you know, there was a lot of controversy surrounding Motley Crue because they were using like pentagrams on their album and all the devil imagery. Hell, the album was called Shout at the Devil. So, I mean, it's in the 80s, it wasn't taken as well as it is today, even though in some cases it's not. But it's like Shout at the Devil, Too Young to Fall in Love, 10 Seconds to Love, Red Hot. I mean, there's some really great songs in here. They even do a Beatles cover. So if you were even, you know, inkling whether or not you liked Motley Crue and you saw that they did a Beatles cover, you know, there's a chance you could probably pick up the album and see what it's all about. But all in all, it's a great album from Motley Crue. If you haven't heard Shout at the Devil, go pick it up and you will really see what kicked off, I think, a different level of hair metal in the 90s or 80s, excuse me.
All right, time's locked in. Out of 5 pentagrams, how many pentagrams would you give Shout at the Devil?
666. Oh, that's not.
You can't do math.
No, I can't.
Just like Tommy Lee.
I'm gonna go 3.5.
3.5.
Yeah, it's a good album. There's a lot of songs on here that I'm not a huge fan of, but where it hits. And I think that this is a very big departure from something as squeaky clean as Def Leppard. Even though I'm sure that they'll tell you otherwise, that it wasn't supposed to be squeaky clean, but their image in comparison to Motley Crue, totally two different things. The pentagrams and the devil quote worshiping and everything. I really think that this was something that gave you a little bit of a different flavor, and you can kind of see that there were bands trying to start slotting themselves into, you know, a more demonic role in music at this time, because in 83, you got to remember too that Slayer came out with Show No Mercy. So that's, even though completely different type of music.
Well, even Judas Priest, not to delve too much into my stuff, like they started to go into the little bit more, not just faster sounding metal and less focused on just like long guitar solos, but also with the leather look. Don't mess with these guys, are going to kick your ass kind of look.
Right.
As opposed to just like the, oh, I'm a cool rock star god up on stage.
Yeah, I mean, this is completely different. It honestly, it probably took the rock star vibe into a different area, more like what we know now.
Yeah.
Than
exactly.
What was like, you know, the Zeppelin look or the Pink Floyd look or any of those types of things. This is more walk down Sunset Boulevard, you're gonna get punched in the face type vibe. But yeah, I think that this was, you know, a very defining, not only album, but defining vibe that came from the early 80s that still lingers today.
Well, let me share my thoughts then before we get too further down the rabbit hole.
All right. So are you ready to shout at the devil?
Oh, I'm ready.
3, 2, 1. You got the looks to kill.
So, you know, it's really easy to forget a time when Motley Crue not only sounded heavy, but actually sounded like a cohesive band. I mean, much of the band's later catalog, with a few exceptions, of course, tended to be overproduced and single-minded. I mean, the songs really sometimes seemed like an afterthought to the band trying to not only be over the top on stage, but just screw and snort anything in sight. So to hear the band sound so tight and hungry and just downright evil on Shout at the Devil, almost like a satanic version of Van Halen, was really just a delightful trip down memory lane. I mean, the only thing that really holds this album back in my mind is some of the production choices. Namely, you know, if you listen to the audio effects on songs like Bastards, more like the intro and outro, it definitely strips its liveliness. I mean, where Pyromania was an amazingly produced album, you can definitely tell that this was on the cheaper side of the 80s production set stuff. But then, and also, admittedly, there's some songs that are a little repetitive. I mean, you wouldn't be wrong to think that the only difference between a song like Looks That Kill and Knock 'Em Dead Kid are the lyrics. But singles like Looks That Kill and Too Young to Fall in Love, along with the title track, of course, really makes you ponder, what would have happened if Motley Crue spent less time getting deeper and deeper into drug addiction and just the crazy rock star annex, and spent more time on creating the larger-than-life anthems for the devil that you hear on Shout at the Devil.
And we have a time. Degrams out of 5.
I'm actually leaning towards 4 stars on this one. So, sidetrack a little bit. I think one of the reasons why the stadium tour that Motley Crue and Def Leppard have been doing for the past few years was so shocking and welcoming is that, and even way back a few years ago when they finally did a UK tour together, the reason why it was so shocking is because both bands really for a while hated each other and hated being lumped into the same category together. And when you listen to Shout at the Devil and Pyromania, you understand why they hated being mentioned in the same sentence.
Oh, yeah.
Shout at the Devil is, like I mentioned in this review, what Van Halen would sound like if they were a satanic punk group. Whereas Pyromania is what I would argue sounds like, what if AC/DC sounded like a polished bubblegum rock group? Like, those are two styles you'd think would play nicely in the sandbox, but they actually don't. And I just, maybe it's because I've always liked a little bit more of the heavier stuff, that's why I'm leaning towards Shout at the Devil between the two of them, although I'm a sucker for pop too. But it really is such a shock because, again, we've kind of crapped on Motley Crue, and I'll stand by my criticism of Vince Neil. Not only do I think he's kind of a garbage human being for some of his life choices, mainly choosing to continue to drink and drive even when he killed someone in a car crash because of his drinking, but even just from performance-wise, he definitely has not held up well. And we'll get maybe into this a little bit more, but definitely the newer stuff, even the band admits that Theater of Pain is a crap album. And if it wasn't for Home Sweet Home, that album wouldn't, the band probably would have been done.
Yep.
Like, they really just, once they just really went off the down. It makes you sad because it's like, you listen to Shout at the Devil, it's like, man, what could have been if they kind of just kept focus? And you forget, you overhear songs like Girls, Girls, Girls and Home Sweet Home. And Dr. Feelgood's a good song too. And that album in particular had some highlights, but you hear them getting into the more glam hair metal stuff that you forget. No, they were a kick-ass metal band at one point. They almost were heavier than most of the hair metal bands.
And they should have stayed that way. And I think because of their exuberant rock lifestyle, and I don't think that they'll admit this, but they really, in order to keep fueling that, they needed to do what was popular.
I mean, I would even argue, and this kind of segues into a topic I wanted to get into before we share our times for the reviews. It's definitely a sound and an essence that they've tried to recapture on their later stuff, namely an album that, oh, what a coincidence, celebrating its 15th anniversary.
It's like we planned this.
It's like we wrote a script or something. But anyway, Saints of Los Angeles, the band's last album and their first album with all 4 original members in almost a decade. You can definitely tell that with Dr. Feelgood originally, they really hyped it as them trying to return to their roots and their
and they
guns.
did that with this one too.
And they definitely, I mean, you can definitely tell all right, let's write the sequel to Dr. Feelgood of this album, of Saints of Los Angeles. As I was revisiting it, I thought to myself, 6 a.m. made a really great overproduced Motley Crue album. Not Nikki Sixx, 6 a.m. Because if you look at the production notes, basically the members of 6 a.m. helped produce and write the songs. And and we kind of hinted at this earlier in the episode, if you believe some urban myths, DJ Ashba even played the guitars on this album instead of Mick Mars. Which I'm not sure if I fully believe.
I don't know if I believe that.
The guitar solos definitely feel like Mick Mars.
It does.
And also because DJ Ashba can't solo. I'm sorry, but
he's not the greatest. If
you've seen him live, you know what I'm talking about. Don't even try to fight me on this, guys. Great in the studio. Don't watch him on stage.
I think that the Saints of Los Angeles had the intentions of being a great Motley Crue album. Like, if they stayed with kind of songs like the title track or like Down at the Whiskey, those two songs I think could have laid the groundwork for a great album, but it really gets shitty pretty quick.
Well, I think it's a little too overproduced.
But
you also understand why.
Yeah.
Because, again, if you've seen Vince Neil live.
Well, not only that, but if you're going by what 6am was trying to do at the time. So when this album came out, this was when they were really pushing Nikki Sixx's book hard.
Uh-huh.
So with that album, they were trying to do a lot of big theatrical things, and they could have taken some of the big theatrical things there and melded it into this. Because also the track on here, White Trash Circus, that actually ended up becoming Motley Crue's touring show. It used to be, what was it, the Carnival of Sins?
Mm-hmm.
And then it turned into the White Trash Circus when they started to get all like the post-grunge bands. I hate that term, and I'll say it every time I have to say it.
It's Motley Crue trying to blend. If Songs of the Sparkle Lounge, whatever the hell that title was trying to cater to the country rock fans. This was trying to cater to the modern hard rock fans, while still incorporating elements of what fans think, quote unquote, think they like about Motley Crue.
Right. I don't know where they were trying to go with the rest of the album. It just doesn't.
They were trying to create the soundtrack to The Dirt, but it was still in production hell.
I don't.
I will say it. Yes.
I will say that I was a very naive music fan at one point.
When it first came out, it was fun.
To think that this was a fun album. But then the more that you listen to it, and going back and listening to it now, it's almost kind of cringeworthy at times.
You know, it wasn't as cringeworthy as I thought it was going to be. And maybe it was only even more cringy just because having just revisited Shadow of the Devil, which, like I mentioned before, surprisingly really refreshing, fun album to revisit. Mm-hmm. Maybe that's why I'm like, okay, it's definitely, and also even again, knowing also the behind the scenes work behind it, and knowing that this is not the pure band that you got on Shadow of the Devil or even Dr. Feelgood. Mm-hmm. Just knowing that this is overproduced. I think where I also am thinking that this is not as cringy as I was expecting it to be is compared to the 3 original songs that they recorded for the actual Dirt soundtrack, mm-hmm. Which makes you kind of nervous because while it's still debatable whether or not Mick Mars plays on it or if it's John 5. John 5 did help write those songs, and those are garbage.
Which also makes me more afraid if Motley Crue does go try to make another album.
Yeah, oh, absolutely. That's why I'm almost saying maybe it's better they just tour and stop recording. But to the point being is that if you compare this Saints of Los Angeles to those 3 songs, I'll take Saints of Los Angeles any day. Maybe that's not saying much. Maybe that's like going to a really terrible buffet in Vegas and going, well, the pancakes look better than the waffles.
So pancakes and waffles aside, what was my time?
Your time was an incredible 1 minute and 46 seconds.
All right. Well, I guess I win this one.
Did I go over?
1 minute, 36 seconds.
Really?
Yup.
I came in under.
Yep. Way under.
Wow. I really thought I was going over on that one. So let me ask you before we wrap this 1983 episode up. Between Pyromania and Shadow of the Devil, which album, after you now revisiting both, which album do you prefer?
Shadow of the Devil.
Yeah.
Because it's not Def Leppard.
You're still sticked on the overhearing it?
I can't. Going through Def Leppard's album was a chore because it's still overplayed in my opinion. And while I can say that it's good, I'm always probably, unless I haven't heard Def Leppard in 5 to 10 years, I'm probably not going to enjoy listening to Def Leppard. I can enjoy listening to Shout at the Devil because there are songs on here that are really good, like Red Hot, mm-hmm. that I haven't heard in a while, and you don't hear them on the radio.
Yeah.
So for those reasons alone, I think, and you can argue that Def Leppard, there's some songs on that album.
Well, and I was about to say, because I actually found that there's some deeper cuts on that album that I was like, I'm actually shocked this wasn't A single, like, why am I blanking on the title? Oh, Too Late for Love, a ballad that was technically a single in the UK, but I'm like, I'm kind of surprised that didn't get pushed in the US a little bit more. Like,
well, Too Late for Love, actually,
I don't think it was a single in the US.
I don't know if it was a single, but I've heard it on the radio.
Oh, you have?
Yeah.
Okay.
So it's anything off of that album is
I'll
always going to
say
leave a bad taste in my mouth.
I think I'm leaning towards Child of the Devil, but by a hair. I actually was taken aback by how much I enjoyed revisiting Pyromania. Mainly because I also have been kind of sick of Over Here. Then again, I also, even as much as I've overheard Photograph, I still am like, yeah, that's a great freaking song.
It is. And it's, once again, there's a reason why those songs overplay, because they're that good. I mean, there's no other way to say it. It's just, it's not for me. If you're a hardcore Def Leppard fan and you love Pyromania, as you probably should, it's just not for me.
Let me ask you, revisiting these albums, I think I know the answer to this. Does revisiting these albums make you more interested in possibly seeing Motley Crue and Def Leppard on tour?
No.
Same.
No. I know what they were, and I've seen them, or I've only seen Motley Crue, but I've seen enough video footage of Def Leppard live to know that don't try to go back to what you were, because you're not going to get there, especially like Vince Neil. Vince Neil is never going to be the same as he was back in the 80s. I'm
honestly shocked I've seen it Motley Crue live as many times as I have.
I don't know. I just can't with them.
Yeah.
I'm actually
John 5 is actually the only thing that piques my interest about seeing them live.
And I'd rather see him with Rob Zombie.
Well, yeah. That's true too. Sorry, John and Motley Crue.
Yeah, I just can't. I can't see myself going to see them live ever again. Also, because I'm in this mode right now where I want to see like things I haven't seen before. So I'd rather just put a bookmark in anything that I've seen.
Fair enough. Well, do you agree with Matt and I's thoughts on Pyromania and Child of the Devil? Did we hit the nail on the head? Do you completely disagree with us? Do you think we missed the point? Let us know. Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, @Epic Footnote. Also subscribe to our YouTube channel, @Epic Footnote as well, to hear more episodes like this, including some of the ones I, self-promoted throughout the episode there. And thank you so much to Lucky 13 Beard Co.
Make sure you log on to lucky13beardco.com and you click on the product page, because we have our own beard oil with them. It's called the Lemmy. It's in tribute to Lemmy from Motorhead. All things that he was about: bourbon, tobacco, cola, and leather, along with a incredibly formulated beard oil, leaves you smelling amazing, feeling epic, and kick off the new year feeling the best that you can feel. Make sure that you log on to lucky13beardco.com, and when you put anything in your cart, use the code EFP10 at checkout. That's EFP10, and you're going to get 10% off of your entire order. Lucky13beardco.com.
Also, before you go complaining in the comments, yeah, we know it wasn't a 2-minute episode. Whatever. Thanks for listening anyway, though. Hope you listen to us again real soon.